Hi, all. I'm Dan Smegrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Monday, April 6th, 2020, and you're watching WGAN TV live at 5. Got a great show for you today, how Matterport service providers can make money doing weekly construction documentation. And we have an awesome guest for the show today. Hey, James, good to see you.
Great to see you again, Dan. Thanks for having me.
You bet. James Duffy. James is Vice President Business Development for IFTI, for IFTI Provision Solutions. And just to give you a quick flavor of the kinds of questions I'm going to be asking James on this show that he'll cover. What is weekly construction documentation? What problems does weekly construction documentation solve? Who are the stakeholders, the users of weekly construction documentation? How is construction documentation used? Before there was Matterport, how was construction documentation done? How is weekly construction documentation done now with Matterport? And how do Matterport service providers help with weekly construction documentation? I have so many more questions. We should actually just jump into it. James, let's begin.
On the next episode.
On the next episode. What is weekly construction documentation?
Oh yeah, sure, Dan. So thanks again for having me. And weekly construction documentation is usually for general contractors or owners to get kind of a weekly cadence of visibility on progress that's happening on the execution of a construction site. So to get to that build level, and they want to basically get a snapshot in time of a pause to basically assess where things are, to find out if they're on schedule, make sure that if there's any issues of work that's been done that might be done in the wrong place, that they can catch it before it becomes a change order and costly. And they want to see that documentation throughout the whole life cycle of that build process.
Well, that's a lot. And I think you've even touched on some of the problems that weekly construction documentation covers. Maybe if we could take it a bit slower and talk about the entire life cycle from maybe the first time a scan is done and what that's used for to all the way to the end of that weekly scan and what that's used for.
Sure. So for a Matterport camera, you usually need to have the walls up because you need to have interiors in order to capture the actual walkthrough of what's there instead of 360 photos. So usually just the buildup of the basic, four corners of a wall. Usually though, there's no windows in there and you're using a lot of natural light to go through the space. But the first instance is really to capture the idea of what the pad looks like. Maybe they have the beginning infrastructure of some of where the walls will be, scaffolding, that kind of stuff of inside the space. But it's usually to get it started to know that they're fully operational for the first scan.
So who would use that first scan?
So it depends on the stakeholder of who's working with you. So if you're usually working for the owner, it's their project management team who needs that visibility of what's going on site. So generally those project managers for the owners will be working with the general contractor, having weekly conversations of what's going on a project. And rather than just maybe getting a picture from the general contractor's cell phone, by having that ability to utilize a scan and walk through the space, they can really get more of a feel of what's going on the site and can have better communication with the general contractor.
So this may not be obvious, but if we're talking about a company that has 200 locations across the United States, the owner is definitely not physically in 200 places. The general contractor may be multiple general contractors. So this is really to facilitate conversation with multiple people who aren't necessarily in the market.
Correct. Yeah, so they're there kind of depending on what that visibility is. There aren't enough people that are involved in that process to keep that open line of communication through different mediums. So right now it's a phone call and maybe an email or a text message for progress reports, photos taken from a phone, but being able to provide more readily available information with a scan to leadership, whether it be at the general contractor level or the owner stakeholder level, which usually a project manager is in charge of those individual spaces. They can kind of see overall assessment from the granular of one space to, like you said, up to like those hundreds of spaces that are going on in construction, throughout the year.
So let's take maybe uh, a retail store or a restaurant that the retail store is thinking about a space to begin construction. So I imagine they might send it to the general contractor in order to facilitate.
Yeah, so there's usually three different kinds of construction. There's an existing space, which then will get turned down and refurbished like a remodel program. There's a tenant improvement, which usually might start from like a white box or an existing space that's going to be turned into something completely different with a new leasee or owner. And then there's new construction, which is basically starting from the ground up. So a pad, putting up walls for the first time and going through. So there's a lot of different types of uses for the monitoring of depending on the project. But for a restaurant, say, they might have ones that they're opening up, like, basically breaking ground on a brand new space and are starting from the ground up. And they'd like to see and capture the construction process from the start to finish, so they can understand the price, the schedule, and the work, and help guide that process through it as one of those kind of options.
So let's talk a little bit about price. So the space perhaps is scanned either by the company that owns the space or the company that's planning to lease the space or has leased the space. They send it to the general contractor. How can the general contractor use that to determine price?
Yeah, so if it's done by the owner, the best thing is the general contractor has already been hired, right? So they already put in the price it's going to take and their estimation of a time frame to get the job done. So how those auditing of that space will help with the general contractor is, if they're not on site, like the site superintendent, to make the decision, they could see the space of how well it's going and better communicate with their subcontractors and vendors of how good they're doing on their job and if they're staying to schedule. Because when they start that out, the general contractor gives a price and a schedule and allows the general contractor to basically self-audit themselves of how well they're doing to that reality. And if there are issues that are coming around, it gives that transparency to communicate with the owner of, hey, we're running into this issue, take a look at it here. This is my solution to that issue. Because none of these sites, it's never perfect. And the better communication between that general contractor and the stakeholder of the owner, the better that understanding is and prevents friction.
Well, I still want to go back just a little bit further.
Sure.
So maybe we talk about the bidding process of a contractor and the subcontractors.
Sure. So if the owner already has an existing site that they already own and operate, a nice thing is to get the scan of the space for the current as-is conditions. And what they can do is then put that out as part of their pre-bid, so they can have a virtual walkthrough of the space, so the general contractor can then price out what they think the cost is going to be. The great part is, compared to in the real world where you just do a physical site walkthrough, you might be looking at a space for a half hour or an hour to ascertain what total costs are. And when you have a snapshot in time virtual walkthrough, you can spend as much time as you have to know the nitty-gritty details of a space to make sure your pricing and scheduling and evaluation is done properly. And then you can take it a step further. If it starts with a general contractor, of after they've been awarded the bid, they can pay and get the scan done, and they can use that for their subcontractors to then bid on. So depending on where you start the process, it is very important though to have that scan, so you can basically understand what the prices are going to be. Or on the latter, if an issue arises, you have a primary source of truth that you've shared that you can communicate with what happened, how come you didn't notice something, and be able to have an open dialogue about it.
So when would be the next logical time to do a scan? The general contractor has quoted on the project, or the subcontractors have quoted to the general contractor. Contractor is quoted on the project based on all the subs. Construction begins. weekly construction progress?
So this one is a little bit more that we've noticed with our clients for the construction monitoring. It really depends on the visibility that is needed, right? It's not a one size fits all program because obviously the more scans you get, the more the price is. And that end client customer has to realize the benefits and risks of adding an upfront cost to knowing what something is or will be. So some have a higher threshold than others. So weekly monitoring, say maybe for a restaurant, might be worth it because the turnaround time is, say, 60 days, which is 2 months. So maybe weekly is only 8 scans, which maybe is palatable. But for a larger size project, which would be done over maybe 3 months to a half a year and spending that amount of money, maybe it's not. So working through that with your client and figuring out what's their threshold of visibility of the amount of work completed. It could be weekly, it might be bi-weekly, or it could be something like phases of construction. So when something is done and another trigger of a pain where it's on to the next like branch of subcontractors where you stop and pause, it could be something like that as well.
Okay, so let's stick with weekly. Let's stick with restaurants. There's obviously money here that's being spent to scan. So how does scanning weekly save money or save time or help solve some other problem?
Sure. So going to scan something weekly, you would look at it two ways of how often would somebody, if you were the one scanning it and giving that snapshot, are you saving somebody a trip that would be otherwise going there? So you should consider, is that person getting on a plane, staying at a hotel, getting a per diem for eating out while they're on site? And also their time of that person is now, instead of maybe managing multiple projects, is this just they're focusing on one? So thinking about how are you're able to save them with direct costs is always important. And then the secondary thing is, really what are their needs? And it's really important to understand what their needs are of. And you can ask them these questions of, if we were able to get there to scan it every week, how often do you usually have a change order because you missed something? And try to have that conversation with them saying, if you had a chance to view everything once a week, you can catch a problem before it becomes a big problem. And if you save one problem, and if you could save one change order, think about what those costs are. And then now think about what it is my cost to go out there to that space. And usually having those kind of questions and answers and dialogue with the owner for those weekly ones, if you can save direct costs for travel for what the work they would normally do and save on their contingency budgets, which usually a lot for some sort of, change orders or, problems that arise where if they have visibility, they can catch it. Those kind of two things would go through their head of, why they would want weekly monitoring.
So how often does a Matterport scan, catch a big problem that was worth doing that scanning weekly?
So I would say, so at the end, we're the agency that goes out to get the visibility. I'm not the one checking on somebody's work to make sure like you did a good job or you did a bad job. That goes to the end user. But the contact that we've had with them of how is this working for you, seeing a lot of visibility, most of the time it's catching the little things that aren't a big thing yet. So we don't know if that person would have caught it later on and then fixed it. So we don't know. But they would speculate of, catching where the outlets are going to be, to making sure they're spaced apart the right way, or, where the plumbing is it supposed to come on the inside of a stud or on the outside of something? Like all of these things that happen day to day, if you were just sitting there walking through of what your expectations are and to meet them, you're improving that visibility and communication so you can feel confident in the work that's being done, that when they close everything up, they put the walls up, they put the paint on, and somebody's in there, they know exactly where everything is in the space, and they're able to hand that off to the facilities team and say, you have a perfectly buttoned up project, because I've seen it throughout its whole history.
Yeah, you mentioned a contingency budget. Is there a statistic about how big a contingency budget generally is? Or how big the line item for mistakes that have to be fixed is?
That's the $64,000 question, Dan. I would say overall, this is just speculation of what I've heard from the clients that we work with. It's usually between 5 and 10% of the project overall. What their tolerance is to accepting that is another story. It kind of depends on the issue. But in general, that's kind of the numbers that I've been hearing on what that extra budget is allowable for, thresholds of contingencies that happen on site.
And it maybe it's not quite clear whether that's on average, there are so many mistakes that get compounded between the different trades that are working on the project that we have to allow money to fix it, or whether there's just changes that they decide to make in the design on the fly. I guess what I'm probing for, James, is
Yeah,
it seems like perhaps before there was a Matterport digital twin done on a weekly basis, that there were problems on a construction site that happened, that perhaps one trade, maybe the mechanical, conflicted with the electrical, conflicted with the plumbing, and that problem didn't get caught soon enough. So work had to be redone by one or two or three of the trades because of that problem. So what I could imagine is that a Matterport digital twin, if it helps a project team catch a problem soon enough, when it's just a ripple in a pond, then they might prevent a tsunami of cost overruns without catching.
absolutely. Absolutely. And for that contingency, and part of that is also schedule delays. So if they're looking at that scan and saying, well, I'm supposed to have the plumbing, in next week, but if we're not finished with where all the walls and studs are, we can't put the plumbing in there. So I can't just assume that you're going to make the deadline. I need to see the work being done, because every time I delay them, every one of those delays, when they write out those construction contracts, they get paid on time and delivery. So if they're not there for that time, somebody's getting paid like ding for that. So as early as you can get that and work something out with other vendors and everything else, kind of helps keep the process moving along and keeping that friction low.
So as Matterport service providers, we need to be thinking about where the pain points are for clients, and those pain points may be either exceeding the contingency budget, or perhaps exceeding the time that was in the contingency budget for the project, or both. So time, money and time are pain points that might even save a client time, save a client money, if these clash detections or problems are identified soon enough.
Definitely.
And so the pain points are generally going to fall into money, and that money may be related to what we just discussed, but it also could be related to the amount of travel by who would typically, so let's say that we're a major phase at a construction project, the drywall's just about to go up. Perhaps you could comment on why it's important to have that scan before the drywall goes up, who uses that, and maybe also a discussion of travel, of how that might fit into that moment in time.
Sure. Usually right before the rough-in stage, which is the adding of the drywall and basically walling up the building, is usually a time, it's a phase turnover time at rough-in, where somebody from the ownership team, so usually a project manager, will go on site and sign off that things are buttoned up and ready to go. So if you can give that person that visibility before they go that this thing is ready, they can review that site inspection in advance of going. So you might not even be, you're letting them know that it's okay to go rather than just taking the general contractor's word for it. Which is just, you have good ones and you have ones that are wishfully thinking that by the time you get there, things will be completed, which you don't want someone to be that deliberate with your time and money of, I want to go when it's ready, not when you think it will be ready, so to speak. So by capturing all that before the walls go up, by seeing it, you can have a pre-walkthrough before you even go on site. And then that'll enable you to have the information you need of if there are issues or questions or something that you see but you don't understand that you need to ask a question when you're on site. It'll give you all that information ahead of time so you can basically have your cheat sheet notes of these are the things I want to discuss before I approve this. And then that nice thing is once you have that scan and the wall goes up, you capture that and that has a residual value to someone else on your team after the fact, like facilities.
Another stakeholder.
Correct.
So I guess I'm trying to think of where, does it make sense to talk about stakeholders? Does it make sense to talk about the different weekly construction progress reporting, or kind of both at the same time?
Yeah, they're both valuable. There's different levels of interest of what you're really capturing, because right now we're also talking about what's going on inside the space. The nice part is, and beauty about the Matterport camera, is you can bring it outside for high level 360 quality photos. So even though you're looking at the inside, that general contractor, what they hired them for, also wants to see what's happening on the outside. So if they see pallets of wood still there on week 4, that's still there week 7, they haven't been touched, that tells them something. Landscaping, when you get towards the end, which are also things those general contractors are responsible for. And you want to make sure before you send a marketing team for a grand opening and pushing out a launch, that this space is ready for it. So there's a lot of quality visual that Matterport camera can get outside as well as inside to give them the whole, because they're looking for the whole asset, and that involves the landscape of the work that's coming in and out, and usually where they leave those things too is important.
Mm-hmm. If we could go back for a moment to just before the drywall goes up.
Sure.
I could imagine that if the Provision Solutions has clients that are using your services on a weekly project management meeting, construction project management meeting. Can you give us a flavor of like, what are the kinds of people that attend those meetings, and what kind of things are they looking for, and how are they using that Matterport tour?
Yeah, sure. So we have on our website, we did create kind of a time lapse of one of those weekly ones, so we can look at that either now or later.
Sure. Let's go take a look.
Okay.
Tell me which tab you'd like me to go to.
Yeah, so just scroll down. So this is the website. And then you kind of scroll down a little bit more.
Provision.ifti.com, provision.ifti.com.
Correct. Yeah, so if you stay here, so right now you're in a scan, and we've actually taken it out of the Matterport to create this kind of time lapse effect. So at one point, so if you go up, you see those arrows on the left and the right, you can go to week 2, week 3. Yeah, you can just go right over where that arrow was. That'll be even easier. So if you turn around the other way, so if you look on the outside, you can see basically what's going on the construction site of what's going on outside as well as inside. And you're seeing everything being built as it goes. So when the walls come fully up, so we're getting the drywall is coming up, and you want to capture what's going on in there. And you can see the phase and time of all the work that's happening. And then even when you get towards, now we're getting closer to the end, and you need finishes to come in. So flooring, millwork, cabinetry, things like that, the lighting fixtures, things are starting to move. So depending on how often they need that visibility, you can let them know this is where the site is. And we're getting closer and closer. So yeah, for this one, kind of like, 16 weeks from start to finish, the basic kind of visibility of where things are.
So a project management team, and maybe if I just go back to
Yeah.
see if I can do this. Yep. So right before that, those drywall went up. We're in a project management meeting. Who's in the meeting, and we're looking this as 360 photos, but this would be a Matterport
Correct.
tour that you could walk through.
Yes, exactly.
What are different people who's in the meeting, who's looking at this? What kinds of things are they looking for? How is that helping them?
Yeah, so one of the basic solutions is you have an individual project manager that's in charge of one site. One of the nice things is for a company that might have these all over the country is they have a dozen, maybe 24 project managers handling all of their ground up new build sites, working with their vendors, their GCs, everything else. One of them that we do the weeklies for, we would go scan every construction project on Thursday after they finish working. And we would scan that site. Usually takes about 24 hours to get the scan back. And we would send it to the client over the weekend, because on Mondays, they would have a weekly project management meeting. And all of them, and what the nice thing is about the Matterport is they could just share their screen like you shared that screen with me. And they would go through their individual sites of somebody's on schedule, like, week 3 of a program, and they're walking through of how well they're doing and what's going on. And they're asking questions to the other parts of the project management team. So the nice part is they really get that whole kind of groupthink experience. So the newest member of the project management team would also be able to share visibility with the most senior person on the team to notice any issues, to see if there's anything, or best communication practices with what's going on. So the nice thing is when you have the scan, those project managers can interact with that site. So sharing something, utilizing the edits to take like a measurement verification here, or embedding a tag for, a flooring specification, so they make sure what goes where, and really having a true sense of comprehension and dialogue around a space. So then basically leadership knows not when they expect to see something before, might be just on a spreadsheet of on schedule or not on schedule. They can have much more clearly defined answers of where they are in a process, on time, on budget, and they can feel more certain than they're on schedule plus contingency. Rather, it's on schedule, on budget, so to speak.
So that project manager, it's probably for the company, is reviewing work that's being done by the general contractor, can have a conversation with the general contractor, a subcontractor, who's ever financing the project. I imagine they're interested to know when to release money, at what stage that the project is at, perhaps.
Yes, they like to see, and when they do the phase turnovers at those phases, that's usually when another check is cut, just to give you an idea. So they want to make sure that they've seen it, have gone on site, and these are just those added values of nobody's perfect. And when you go on site and you do an inspection and you're seeing everything, you're doing the best you can with the time that you have. So if you're working on behalf of the owner and you're the project manager, you're walking through a space to try to see everything you can in just one shot, to walk through it. You might miss something. The other thing is you probably have somebody walking you around telling you what they want you to see, like a general contractor pointing out all the good things and maybe failing to point out something that they're having a difficult time with. Kind of depends on the relationship. So having that scan provides a real value because that person will be able to look at their work in a bubble to kind of identify and define really how it is from an objective standpoint and not a subjective one.
You know, while you've been describing this, part of what's been going on in my mind thinking about this is, uh, uh, you know, gee, that project manager who maybe was managing multiple projects was spending a whole lot of time on an airplane. And now perhaps they don't need to spend as much time traveling and could actually manage more projects.
That's right. So it really helps those project managers manage more projects, but really manage them more effectively of all that time that's lost just in between in the air, getting back and forth. It is important for those project managers to have a relationship with their general contractor, but the frequency of that amount just going there to check in to say hello, with where we are with the technology and what we're capable of providing them from an efficiency standpoint, it's really, we're at a level where they can have their cake and eat it too, of still going there when they need to keep the relationship, to keep the work going, but not having to go there in between.
Cool. And then there's different stakeholders. So I imagine, I'm even thinking even a safety manager could probably be looking at this site and immediately walking through it from a standpoint of, are they doing things safely?
Yes, and that's very good for the internal team and to pass along to know that basically when they're around the site, they can look for hazards that might be happening in the construction site of, they can see where things are and to know right away if there's an issue that they need to catch and basically save them from any sort of future fines that could happen before an inspector goes on site to check on it.
Okay. So I'm a Matterport service provider in Atlanta. I have a lot of big brands from, let's say, restaurants in Atlanta. Where do I begin in terms of what are the right titles of the people that I might reach out to who perhaps have not been doing construction documentation quite like this? Maybe they've been traveling quite a bit. Who are the people that might just go, wow, this is crazy. Yeah, this will make a difference in our weekly meetings on construction progress.
Yeah, so there's the people that will see the effects of it because it'll transform their daily life, which is project managers, senior project managers that oversee kind of the space. And then the people from the strategic point of view, it's director, VP of construction for the owners that would see this as a new value. And they'll be able to ascertain what's going on and having a real idea of their schedules and budgets of what's going on with those projects.
So is this at the restaurant? Is this at the general contractor? Is this at the architect? Who's got the most pain? Who can save the most money, the most time? Where do I begin that conversation?
Yeah, so there's the best part about Matterport is it's good for everybody and everyone can find that value in that construction process. Usually it is at that title of construction, of a VP of construction, director of construction for an end user. There are large general contractors that might be regional or national that would also have that same benefit of keeping track of their work and progress to make sure basically at their level, it's their reputation that they care about. And they'll be willing to spend that money to ensure the quality of work is being done and they're able to talk to their clients at a level of, I won't just tell you what you want to hear, I'll show you the work. And that transparency is really important for a lot of those upper echelon general contractors that will want to say, we're confident in our work and when we say and how we do something, and we'd like to even show you how we're doing that and give you that visibility, on behalf of you.
Mm-hmm. How about the Matterport Matter Pack, the data file? Is that of interest in this space?
So it can be. I haven't had a chance to really use it so much. It's more on the visual spectrum and kind of the measurement tool that's there. For the as-built of getting a new space to before they remodel it and then do construction, that is where they want it. They already have plans for how they want it to look like. And over that time, they're getting any sort of visible information, sending an architect on site that needs to sign off.
Okay, so I'll since you and I did a previous show on how Matterport service providers can make money scanning for as-built, let's just refer our audience
Sure.
to that
Yes.
specific show. So the challenge, the good news, bad news. If I walk into a major restaurant group, it's got multiple restaurants doing refreshes across the United States, and I show them this, and they go, "Wow, this is great." But we do have 200 locations we're going to refresh this year across the United States. Can you help us with that? That's certainly beyond my ability. So where does IFTI Pro Vision Solutions fit into that conversation? What is it that, how do I, can you help us? And how do I work with you?
So the answer is yes, and great question, Dan. So yeah, we do have over 300 plus technicians across the United States and Canada, and we are able to help and scale with our own group of project managers, quality control to oversee all those other projects that you can't handle. So the nice thing is we're comfortable working as a subcontractor for you if you'd like to be the end client that works with the relationship, or we can take the lead and we'll make sure that we'll work with you for your region and area visibility. So regardless of the construction, the time frame, how often that's there, IFTI is a 20-year company with great relationships and reputation in the industry and has the ability to give that consistent visibility for you or your client.
Maybe it might be helpful to have a bigger picture understanding of IFTI Pro Vision Solutions.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we've been around for over 20 years. IFTI, our Pro Vision Solutions in the retail and restaurant and hospitality industry has been around for over 2 years. And we basically have been an expert project management solutions company. And we utilize Matterport as one of our primary vehicles to get our end clients the visibility and documentation that they need for their work. So we work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And we offer no travel necessary, fixed rate solutions for the clients to make that job a lot easier.
You mentioned no travel necessary. Obviously today, Monday, April 6th, 2020, here in Atlanta, we're under a shelter at home order related to COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic. Nearly 50 states are under those kinds of orders. That said, there are many markets where real estate construction has been considered an essential service to keep moving forward. Where does this Matterport scanning fit into weekly construction documentation today in this environment?
No, it's a good question, and it's a harsh reality of what we're living in right now with these shelter-in-place orders. There are a lot of essential businesses.
In fact, I see that you're working yourself out of the house, out of a spare bedroom.
Yes, this is not my normal office space. So we are all doing this and taking very seriously. In terms of providing that visibility for those essential businesses that still need to operate, for a large portion of them, construction is part of that essential business to keep things moving. So we are still fully operational and working around the clock to help those places get to the information and work done that they need. So if it's anywhere from a convenience or grocery store, gas stations, healthcare facilities, supermarkets, these types of financial institutions, this visibility now actually has never been a better time to help people know that this solution exists, because there might be a bottleneck in that slowing down that progress, because before they might needed someone to travel on site to approve something or to get visual information to start something or move to the next phase. So at the time, this is a great way to share that there is an opportunity to keep the work going if the only thing that's encumbering the work is the ability for site inspection or travel, so to speak.
So, a lot of large companies, whether they're large general contractors or large franchises of the categories that you were describing, they, in their mind, may think, oh my gosh, how do I get the work done? The work needs to keep going, but I can't fly.
That's right. Because just think of it, all the existing construction projects, the people that are doing the construction are localized. They are already there and they can keep working. When they can't work is usually when somebody that's at the ownership level and their stakeholders usually have to travel to these sites to inspect, to make sure they're okay. So it is that level of where they're missing, that missing stopgap is that 3D imaging, scanning the space to help that documentation of what's going on, because nobody wants to skip a beat on what their expectations are and visibility, because they're not going to say, well, you just keep going and tell me when it's done and I'll just hope you did everything correctly. It doesn't work like that. So if you're able to, if you've had a client in the past that you've done work with, if you worked with a general contractor before, maybe only for a grand opening to show off the space for their portfolio, now is a good time to reintroduce yourself and let them know that if you need visibility and you need to interact with your clients, maybe that are that would have to travel usually, this is a great stopgap for you.
This solves yet an additional problem that we didn't talk about earlier. Earlier, we talked
Correct.
about saving time, saving money, reducing change orders. Now we have this new problem, how to enable work to continue when travel is not happening.
Yeah, I think overall it's called, it's part of like their business continuity. So how are they able to keep functioning during this crisis that we're in? And this is one of those measures where visibility is part of that continuity that Matterport scanning providers can provide.
You have any thoughts about how this pandemic affects weekly construction documentation once we emerge from this pandemic?
So once we get there, and I'm always looking for that light at the end of the tunnel, like so many other people, is when we get there, the people that will have understood that this solution was out there, that they've had visibility on looking for, because right now people are in their bedrooms, in their home offices, trying to figure out, how am I supposed to work now in this new environment? These are one of those new solutions that they might not have heard of, or maybe heard of but didn't use, that this gives them an excellent opportunity to judge, to say, wow, going forward, maybe I don't need to travel as often. I can utilize this instead, and I can make my work be more efficient overall because I've basically archived my digital twin of that physical space to help me with our progress and monitoring of the work.
Someone wants to get in touch with you, IFTI Provision Solutions. What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so you can always just go to our website. It's provision.ifti.com. You can also email me anytime at james.duffy, D-U-F-F-Y, at ifti.com. Or you can just call our phone number, which is up there, the 800 number, anytime, 490-3657. And we'll be happy to help. We also have social media, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can find us any which way, and you can also find us on the We Get Around network. So if you need anybody, I think there's a guy named Dan that could help us if you need to.
Thank you. So actually, IFTI Provision Solutions, when you do have 300 Matterport service providers in your existing network, and when you can't find a Matterport service provider, you've actually been sourcing the pros in the We Get Around network forum community. So it's great great way that we can all collaborate together to help lift all boats. James, are there any questions that I haven't asked you about weekly construction documentation I should ask you about?
No, I think we covered like, like the whole gamut of the whole thing, Dan. So great work.
Great. James, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and look forward to hopefully you'll have me on again sometime.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We've been visiting with James Duffy. He is the Vice President, Business Development for IFTI Provision Solutions, IFTI Provision Solutions. For James in the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum, and you've been watching WGAN TV Live at 5.
Take care, Dan. Thank you so much.